In the depths of the unknown, where shadows whisper and fear takes form, tonight I bring you Berenice by Edgar Allan Poe.
Welcome to Classic Storytime Hub, the place where classic horror and mystery come alive. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a journey into the shadows.
Misery wears many faces. The suffering of this world stretches wide, shifting in colors like a vast rainbow, each shade distinct, yet all bleeding into one another. And still, I wonder, how can beauty give birth to ugliness? How can a symbol of peace twist itself into sorrow? Just as evil follows in the shadow of good, so too does joy conceal the seed of grief. Yesterday's bliss becomes today's torment, and the pain we endure now often arises from the ghost of pleasures that never came to be.
My name is Aegeus. The name of my family I shall keep veiled, for it carries with it a weight older than memory itself. Our ancestral halls rise like gray sentinels against the sky, ancient, brooding, and untouched by time. They say ours is a bloodline of visionaries, and the house itself bears witness to that curse. In the faded frescoes of the grand hall, in the heavy tapestries that darken the chambers, in the carved stone of the armory, and most of all, in the gallery of forgotten paintings and the strange, shadow-laden library, every corner whispers of minds that saw too much and dreamed too far.
My earliest memories are bound to that chamber, and to the countless volumes that lined its walls. It was there my mother drew her final breath. It was there I first opened my eyes to life. And yet, I cannot believe that life began in that moment. No, the soul has walked before, though you may deny it. I will not argue. I am convinced, and that is enough. For within me lingers a strange remembrance, shapes that drift like phantoms in the air, eyes that gaze with unspoken meaning, sounds, sweet yet sorrowful, echoing from some forgotten realm. These memories cling to me like shadows, shifting, uncertain, impossible to banish, so long as the light of reason still burns within my mind.
In that chamber, I first drew breath. It was as though I had awakened from a long night of nothingness, only to find myself in a realm of wonder, a palace built of imagination, a kingdom ruled by solemn thought and ancient learning. As a child, I wandered wide-eyed through that world, losing myself in books, surrendering my youth to endless reverie. But as the years passed and manhood found me still within the mansion of my fathers, something strange took hold. The springs of my life grew stagnant, my very thoughts inverted, as if the world itself had turned inside out. Reality came to me like a dream, hazy, fleeting, insubstantial, while the wild visions of my imagination hardened into the only truth I could claim. Dreams became my existence, and existence itself a dream.
Berenice and I were cousins, raised together within the shadowed halls of my father's house. Yet how differently we grew. I, frail, withdrawn, buried in the gloom of endless study. She, radiant, graceful, brimming with life, her laughter echoing across the hillsides, while I wasted away in cloistered meditation. I lived within the prison of my own mind. She wandered freely through the world, untouched by the shadows that haunted me. Berenice. Even now, when I whisper her name, the ruins of memory tremble, and 1,000 recollections rise like startled ghosts. I see her still, her beauty dazzling, almost unreal. A sylph among the gardens of Arnheim, a water spirit dancing by its fountains. But then the light dimmed. Mystery and terror crept in. A fatal illness struck her like a desert wind, swift and merciless. And as I watched, the spirit of change consumed her, altering her mind, her habits, her very soul. Until at last, though she stood before me, I could no longer recognize her. She was Berenice in form, but Berenice no longer. Among the many afflictions that ravaged my cousin after that first fatal illness, one was the most dreadful of all, a strange form of epilepsy. Often it ended in trances so deep they seemed indistinguishable from death itself, and her sudden, violent awakenings were as terrifying as the silence that preceded them. Meanwhile, my own condition worsened. They called it a disease, and perhaps it was, but it grew within me like a fire, consuming every hour, every moment, until it ruled me completely. It was a madness of the mind, a monomania. My thoughts clung with unnatural intensity to the smallest of things. Objects that others would dismiss as trivial became, to me, obsessions of unbearable weight. I know it is difficult to understand. How can I explain the feverish grip of attention that chained me to the most ordinary sights of the world? Yet for me, each detail became a prison, each shadow, each shape, a universe in which my mind was lost. Hours upon hours I would sit, my mind shackled to the most meaningless of things. A stray mark in the margin of a book, a crooked letter in its print, such trifles held me captive. I could spend an entire summer's day staring at the slant of a shadow across the tapestry, or lose a whole night watching the flame of a lamp tremble, or the dying embers of a fire fade into ash. Whole days vanished as I breathed in the perfume of a single flower. I would repeat a common word again and again until its sound became hollow, an empty echo stripped of all meaning. At times I would sit so still, so utterly motionless, that I lost all sense of body, of movement, of existence itself. These were but a few of the strange compulsions that ruled me, harmless perhaps compared to darker fates, but still defying all reason, all explanation.
Do not mistake me. The strange, morbid attention that consumed me was not the idle wandering of imagination common to all men. No, it was something far more unnatural. The dreamer, when lost in thought, begins with an object of meaning, and from it drifts into a maze of ideas, until the original spark is forgotten in the luxury of reverie. But my condition was not that. Mine was not the indulgence of fancy, but a disease of the mind itself, an obsession that clung to the most trivial of things, refusing to let go, until every fiber of my being was chained to what others would dismiss as nothing. In my case, the object was always trivial, frivolous in itself, yet through the distortion of my diseased vision, it swelled into something vast, unnatural, and consuming. My thoughts did not wander outward into new ideas, as with the dreamer. No, they circled back, again and again, to the same pitiful center. There was no pleasure in these meditations. None. And when at last the reverie ended, the object that had first caught my eye had not faded. It had grown monstrous, exaggerated beyond reason, until it filled my mind with a dreadful intensity. In short, the faculty most exercised in me was not the speculative, as in the daydreamer, but the attentive, an attention so sharp, so diseased, that it chained me to the smallest of things until they became my entire world.
Even my books in those days seemed to echo the sickness of my mind. They did not cure me. If anything, they deepened the fever. Their pages were filled with strange imaginings, with thoughts as tangled and inconsequential as my own. I remember them well. The solemn treatise of the Italian Curio, the mighty City of God by St. Augustine, and Tertullian's De Carne Christi. It was there I found that dreadful paradox. The Son of God is dead. It is credible because it is absurd. He was buried and rose again. It is certain because it is impossible. Those words consumed me. For weeks I pored over them, circling endlessly, searching for meaning where none could be found. And the more I searched, the deeper I sank, until the words themselves became a prison, and I their willing captive. My reason was like that ocean crag of which Ptolemy Apestion once spoke, unyielding to the fury of storms, unmoved by the violence of men, yet trembling at the faintest touch of a single flower, the asphodel. So it was with me. The great terrors of the world left me untouched, but the smallest trifles could unseat my mind. And though one might think that the dreadful change in Berenice, her illness, her altered spirit, would have given me endless matter for my strange and fevered meditations, it was not so. No, her suffering did not seize my thoughts. My disease was of another kind, and it clung only to the trivial, the insignificant, the things others would never notice, yet to me they became everything. In the rare moments when my mind was clear, her suffering did wound me. I grieved for the ruin of her gentle life, and I often pondered bitterly how such a sudden and terrible change could have been wrought. But these thoughts were not born of my disease. They were the natural sorrow any man might feel. My disorder, true to its nature, turned elsewhere. It did not dwell upon her calamity, but upon the strange, appalling alterations in her body, the distortion of her very identity. And here lies the most dreadful truth. In the brightest days of her beauty, I had never loved her, not once. It was only in her ruin, only in the grotesque shadow of what she had been, that my mind began to cling to her with a fascination darker than love. In the strange anomaly of my existence, I had never known feelings of the heart. My passions belonged not to love, but to thought. At dawn, through the gray light of morning, at noon, beneath the lattice-work of forest shadows, and at night, in the silence of my library, she would pass before my eyes. Yet I did not see her as the living Berenice, breathing and real. I saw her only as a vision, a dream, an abstraction of what a woman might be. Not to be admired, but dissected. Not to be loved, but to be analyzed. And now in her presence I shuddered.
Her approach drained the color from my face. Still, I mourned her ruin, pitied her desolation, and remembered that she had once loved me deeply. And so, in a moment of weakness, an evil moment, I spoke to her of marriage. The day of our union drew near. It was winter, yet the air was strangely warm, calm, heavy with mist, as though the season itself had fallen into a dream. I sat alone, or so I believed, in the inner chamber of the library. The silence pressed close, broken only by the faint rustle of pages and the beating of my own heart. Then, lifting my eyes, I saw her. Berenice stood before me. No sound had announced her, no footstep, no breath. She was simply there, as if conjured from the shadows themselves.
Was it my imagination? Or the mist that clung to the air, the dim twilight of the chamber, the gray draperies that hung like shrouds around her figure? I could not tell. She spoke no word, and I, God help me, I could not have uttered a syllable, not for all the world. A chill like ice coursed through my veins. Anxiety crushed my chest. Curiosity, dark, consuming, seized my soul. I sank back into the chair, breathless, motionless, my eyes fixed upon her. Her body, wasted beyond recognition. Not a trace of the radiant being she once was remained in that fragile frame. And then, my gaze, burning, unwilling, fell upon her face. Her forehead, high, pale, unnaturally calm. Strands of hair, once black as midnight, now blazed with a sickly yellow, falling in wild ringlets across her hollow temples. Their brightness clashed hideously with the sorrow etched upon her face. Her eyes, lifeless, empty, pupilless. Their glassy stare froze my blood, and I recoiled, turning instead to her lips, thin, withered, trembling. And then they parted. A smile crept across her face, slow, deliberate, filled with some dreadful meaning. And in that moment, her teeth revealed themselves to me. Would to heaven I had never seen them, or that, having seen, I had died where I sat.
A door closed, and she was gone. But from the chamber of my mind she did not depart. No, there remained the vision, the white, ghastly spectre of her teeth, not a blemish on their surface, not a shadow on their enamel, not the faintest line upon their edges. Every detail of that dreadful smile had burned itself into my memory, etched there forever. And now I saw them more clearly than when she stood before me. The teeth, they were here, there, everywhere, filling the air, crowding my sight, pressing upon me with their pale, merciless presence. Long, narrow, blindingly white, and always the pale lips writhing about them as though frozen in that first terrible smile. Then came the full fury of my madness. I fought against it. God knows I fought, but its grip was irresistible. In all the countless objects of the world, I saw nothing but them. The teeth. They filled my mind with a burning, frenzied desire. All else, every thought, every interest, was swallowed up in their image. They alone existed for me. They alone became the essence of my life. I turned them in every light,
I imagined them in every form. I studied their shape, their peculiarities, their dreadful perfection. I pondered their nature, their strange alteration, until at last I shuddered, for in my diseased imagination I gave them life. I saw in them a power, a presence, a terrible expression, as though even without the lips they could speak.
Of Mademoiselle Sally, it was once said, all her steps were sentiments. And of Berenice, God help me, I believed that all her teeth were ideas. Ideas. Yes, there lay the madness that consumed me. Ideas. It was for this reason I coveted them with such frenzy. I felt, no, I knew, that only in possessing them could I ever be restored to peace. That only in claiming them as my own could I be given back to reason. Evening closed in upon me. Darkness came, lingered, and passed. Another dawn broke, and still I sat motionless in that solitary chamber. Another night gathered its mists around me, and still I remained, buried in meditation, enslaved by the phantom of the teeth. They floated before me with hideous clarity, shifting in the play of shadow and light, never leaving, never loosening their grip. Then, suddenly, a cry of horror piercing my dream. It was followed by voices, troubled, urgent, and low moans of sorrow, of pain. I rose at last, unsteady, and flung open the library door. There in the antechamber stood a servant girl, her face drowned in tears. She told me the words that froze my blood. Berenice was no more. Struck by epilepsy in the morning, she had withered through the day, and now, as night closed in, the grave was ready, the burial prepared. I found myself once more in the library, alone. It was as though I had awakened from some wild and troubled dream. Midnight had come, and I knew, I knew that since the setting of the sun, Berenice had been laid in the earth. But of the hours between, I could recall nothing clearly. Only shadows, only fragments. A page in the record of my life, written over with horrors too dim to read, yet too hideous to forget. I tried to decipher them, tried to force meaning from the chaos, but in vain. And always, like the echo of a sound long departed, there rang in my ears the shrill, piercing cry of a woman's voice. I had done a deed. What was it? I asked aloud, and the whispering echoes of the chamber answered me. What was it? A lamp burned faintly at my side. Beside it lay a small box, plain, unremarkable. I had seen it often before, for it belonged to the family physician. And yet, why was it here, upon my table? Why did I shudder as my eyes fell upon it? I could not answer. My gaze dropped instead to the open pages of a book before me. A line had been underscored, words of the poet Ibn Zinayat. My companions said to me, if I should visit the grave of my beloved, my sorrows would be somewhat eased. Why then, as I read those words, did my hair rise upon my head? Why did my blood turn to ice within my veins? A faint tap sounded at the library door. Slowly it opened, and there entered a servant, pale as the tenant of a tomb, moving on tiptoe, his eyes wide with terror. His voice, low, husky, trembling, spoke in broken fragments. A cry had pierced the silence of the night.
the household had gathered, searching in the darkness for its source. And then, his words grew sharp, distinct, unforgettable. He whispered of a grave, violated, of a body, shrouded, disfigured, yet still breathing, still palpitating, still alive. He pointed to garments, stained, muddy, clotted with blood. I could not speak. He took my hand instead, and I saw the marks, deep indentations, the imprint of human nails. Then his trembling finger turned toward the wall. I followed his gaze. For long moments I stared, uncomprehending, until at last I saw it. A spade. A cry tore itself from my throat. I staggered to the table, seized the small box that lay upon it. My hands shook violently. I could not force it open. It slipped, crashed to the floor, and burst apart. And from it spilled a dreadful cargo, the cold gleam of dental instruments, and scattered across the floor 32 small white ivory-like shapes, rolling, rattling, tumbling into the shadows.
And thus the story ended. If you liked this journey into the worlds of classic literature, do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more.